Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Braiding Indigenous and Intercultural Perspectives in Online Learning, 1 year on. My name is Morgan Flanagan, and I'm the Coordinator of Events and Special Initiatives at the BC Council for International Education. Thank you very much for joining us today on what I hope will be an informative session on collaborative online Indigenous intercultural learning. Before we get started, it's important to acknowledge that at BCCIE we live and work on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish people of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Now on to a few housekeeping items. I know we're all familiar with Zoom, but as a reminder, please use the Q&A function to send your questions or if you have any comments. If you need any technical assistance during the webinar, please use the chat box and we'll help answer your inquiry. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker for today's session from North Island College. We have Laura Johnson, faculty in the English Department and in Indigenous Education. Thank you for joining us today, and over to you.
Well, thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to be here with everyone. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. There we go. And hopefully everyone can see the presentation. So I just want to start by acknowledging that I am a guest, happy to live, love, and work on the unceded and traditional territories of the Comox First Nation. My name is Laura Johnston, and I am presenting from home today. So I just wanted to let everyone know that if my fur babies start scratching at the door really hard, I might have to get up and let them in or out. So I also wanted to share that I will be speaking on behalf of myself and Margaret Herndon, who was unable to join us today. So I just thought I would start off with that piece. And again, I'm really honored to be here today and to share what's happening, with our COIIL, or COIL with an extra I. So I also will let you know that I have my presentation, the slide presentation up on the other screen. So I'll be looking back and forth between the screen just to keep myself on track, because I can be a bit of a chatter and might end up going off in different directions if I'm not paying attention. So again, welcome to today's presentation, Braiding Indigenous and Intercultural Perspectives in Online Learning, 1 year on. This is a project that Margaret and I have been working on for a couple of years at least now. And so we also had the honor of presenting, I believe it was last February, about where we were at with the COIL project. And now we're just looking at where are we now? So I'm just going to shift this slide to the next page. Also just acknowledging that, BCCIEE is on the Coast Salish people, the territories of the Coast Salish peoples of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Wanted to acknowledge that again. So normally in an in-person presentation, or if we had a small group, we would actually have a bit of a sharing circle. Even though we're online in our little boxes, we still refer to them as sharing circles. And we would start to build a bit of a community. So because of time and the digital space that we're in, I would invite you to share in the chat box just a little bit about, who are you, whose territory or territories are you speaking from, if you feel comfortable sharing that, and why are you here at this particular presentation. So just invite you to share a little bit about that. I'll just share a little bit more about myself as part of that community building. I am Métis, and I'm a citizen of the Métis Nation of British Columbia, as well as Mikisew here in the Comox Valley. My family traces its genealogy from the west coast of BC, which is, I was born in Powell River and raised between Powell River, Vancouver, and Vancouver Island, which is, I live on Vancouver Island now. Um, so we can trace our genealogy all the way to the original Red River Métis settlement, with a number of connections along the way, including the Papachase Cree. In some of the names in the family are Gladue, Baptiste. Ledre is my grandfather's name, and he is Cree Métis, or was Cree Métis. Again, speaking from the Comox Valley, or the unceded and traditional territories of the Comox First Nation. And I am here as a Métis person, but also an Indigenous post-secondary scholar and instructor. I came upon this whole project. You may know this if you've been in other sessions with me, but I came upon this project accidentally when I went to Costa Rica as part of a faculty mobility exchange. And as part of that exchange, we decided to do a virtual class with my English 096, which is an Indigenous focused First Peoples 12 at the college level. And so we did a virtual exchange with Indigenous students from Tech in Costa Rica. And we really started to investigate, what does it mean to indigenize the digital or the virtual workplace. And through that project, or through that accidental virtual exchange, COIIL with the extra I started to develop. And Margaret came on, and we did some sessions on COIIL. And COIIL is actually Margaret's specialization. And so we work really well together, interweaving traditional teachings, both based locally. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that. And so what else did I want to share about that? So we just realized it was really important to start to think about indigenizing the digital space, and also to create connections internationally, which seems to be, I feel, is more important, becoming more important than ever, given some of the solidifying of colonial boundaries and borders, and just the more and more students that are working online. So I think I'll jump to the next slide, because I can tell that I'm already getting ahead of myself and probably sharing stuff that I'm supposed to be sharing afterwards. So bear with me. So it has been a joint project since it became the COIL with the extra I, or COIL. North Island College works with a consortium of, I believe, 12 different institutions, and these are some of our main partners. So Aurora College, Coast Mountain College, Northern Lights College, Vancouver Community College, Yukon University, and this is Margaret's space of knowledge. So we initially got funding, I believe, through the Global Skills Opportunity and EduCanada. I'm just going to pause there for a minute, because I'm like, is that correct? So we no longer have funding. That was our initial funding. And one of the things I'm finding interesting now is trying to keep the work up to date while also teaching full time and life. So it's slowed down from the beginning, but let me go to the next slide and continue sharing with where we're at. So I'm seeing that there are some notes in the chat bar. I'm hoping those will be just the invitation to share who you are, and I'll check those in a bit. But so the learning objectives for today, Margaret and I really thought about, like, where are we at, and what would we want to share? What are our objectives coming in to present today? And also, where are we going? So we have three main objectives at this point for right now. well, I just repeated myself, but that's okay. So, identify ongoing opportunities and challenges for institutions working toward being Indigenous serving and encompassed within internationalization of the curriculum. So, bringing indigenization and intercultural internationalization or intercultural competency together. Um, Critically evaluate the inclusion of pathways for indigenizing COIL VE initiatives in online learning, and reflect on how this COIL pathway continues to be used across institutional contexts is really where we're at in the movement of the project. So I'll invite you to think about some of those objectives, and when we get further on, maybe share a little bit of your own thoughts around these objectives and where we're heading. So, and I might be speeding through. I'm used to having Margaret with me sharing. So just let me know if I need to slow down. So, just to recap, again, if you've joined previous sessions, you'll already have a sense of what we're doing with COIEL, or COIL with the extra I. Um, as many of you know, COIL became more popular during the pandemic. And again, that's how I went when I went to Costa Rica with the Faculty Mobility Exchange, was right in the middle of the pandemic. And I had this brief moment of a break that I was able to travel. And so that's when I started to learn more about COIL. And again, thinking about how do we interweave indigenizing perspectives into the digital classroom, which is it's an interesting journey, and I'm learning a lot. The guiding principles of COIEL, or COIL with the extra I, a collaborative online indigenizing intercultural learning, are to have a non-Indigenous instructor working with an Indigenous instructor, so coming together in a partnership of collaboration and reciprocity. And the project reflects and integrates Indigenous pedagogical approaches and includes participants engaging with and prioritizing the needs of Indigenous communities local to each partner institution. So these are two really important principles. One of the issues, or one of the challenges, or even one of the rewards that I have faced or continue to face as an Indigenous post-secondary instructor who also develops Indigenous focused academic reading, writing, research courses, Indigenous literature courses, and also the Indigenous Leadership certificate at North Island College, is that I often have non-Indigenous instructors ask me for guidance about how do we bring indigenizing processes into the academic classroom. And I really love that and feel honored to be consulted with those questions. And at the same time, it can become a bit overwhelming trying to meet all those needs. So what Margaret and I working together realized is that it's really important to have an Indigenous instructor with a non-Indigenous instructor in this relationship of reciprocity. So initially, we thought about it as mentorship, and I see that term come up a lot in the research that I'm doing around these kind of relationships. But reciprocity, because we all have much to learn from each other. So it really seems to be a nice fit to bring together this virtual exchange opportunity for students, and to have an Indigenous instructor working with a non-Indigenous instructor, and really drawing on the strengths of each to interweave. And I think that's one of the most important pieces, is that this is an interweaving of Indigenous teachings, intercultural teachings, uh, international teachings, and also the expertise of the instructors coming together, as well as the students themselves. Um, the other piece that's really important, and that comes in the second guiding principle, is working with the needs of Indigenous communities local to each partner institution. So if I get the opportunity, as I go through the slides, I will probably share the modules that we've set up at North Island College specifically for North Island College faculty and based in our local First Nations and Indigenous organizations. One of the tasks for anybody that becomes involved in one of these COIIL projects is to find out what's going on locally for you in whatever region or area you are located, to really work with the Indigenous communities that are local to you. And so when we think about what we're doing at North Island College, we think of it as an example, not the the canon or the solidified the final module or principles, I suppose, the pathways that you would take to bring indigenizing into the digital workplace or classroom. So really working with Indigenous communities local to you, thinking about language and languages and how to interweave those into your own COIL, the needs that you have or that the local First Nations have. Those are what you want to work with as you're developing your own COIL project, if that's something that you're interested in doing. So let me just flip the slide. So I thought, and again, if you've been in sessions with us, you may have seen this already. Was our first attempt at creating the Indigenous Serving Special Topics Framework for COIIL. And so I'm not going to go through these steps because I want to show you how they've shifted through consultation and reflection and thinking about the languages that we're using and how we're bringing people, how we're encouraging people, advocating for people to engage in these kinds of projects. So let me just go to the next slide to show you what happened after one of our first, we made this first attempt. We started having conversations and reflections, and we started writing all over this first document to really think about how are we going to reflect the needs and the priorities of local First Nations. I'm going to repeat myself, local to North Island College. So we went from Indigenous serving to focused. We realized that framework was an inappropriate word for what we were doing. You'll notice that we have circles set up with arrows showing that all of this is circular. And so really thinking about what do each of these pathways sound like from more Indigenous perspectives. And as I said, receiving feedback from partners, from consultations, from the Indigenous Education Council, etc., that we work with at North Island College, our elders and residents, all those pieces. So I'll just flip to the next one. Again, is this where we're at now? I believe this is, yes. This is, I think, our most current media. What is that we call this, that we would share with others, that is up in our North Island College platform that people can look at to see what does this pathway mean. One of the things that's really important is that you could come into this pathway at any point here, depending on your area of expertise and what you already know about interweaving Indigenous pedagogical approaches into the classroom and into the digital landscape. So if we were starting brand new, if this was a whole brand new um, endeavor for you, you would start off with the positioning, the walking in a good way, which includes understanding your own story, honoring the local. So, again, acknowledging the territories and getting to know the territories and the land that you're walking on, and reflecting really on your heart and your spirit, that holistic perspective, bringing that into creating one of these virtual exchange opportunities for students or for faculty. Actually, we've had conversations about having faculty specific ones. There was a note that I wanted to say about this positioning and walking in a good way, but I might have gone off into another spot in my brain. Oh, that's too bad because I can sort of feel it. Anyhow, oh, I know what it was. Professional development. So one aspect of interweaving Indigenous pedagogical approaches into the classroom, whether that be digital or into an in-person classroom, is taking the time. And so we really encourage people to make the decision or to start to think about developing one of these COIL projects ahead of time. So, including some of the work in professional development time as you prepare yourself. And so, the positioning is something that would actually happen during your professional development as you begin to consider what kind of project you would want to work on. You'd think about your own position. Why are you coming into this project? Who are your resources? So doing some research. We're really lucky at North Island College. We have elders in residence. We have the Indigenous Education Council. We have the Working Together working group that gets together once a month. To discuss new projects and also to give support to faculty who are bringing Indigenous pedagogical approaches into their classrooms or their curriculum. So we have lots of resources, and that's a really important piece, is finding out who are your resources, how will you think about or how will you begin to create a project that that you are invested in, but is also not but and is also meeting the needs of the local First Nations or Indigenous communities and organizations that you might be working with. So definitely taking time, as most work, Indigenous specific work, includes that relationship building, the reflection, that holistic perspective of really understanding that you're a human being taking on this new project, and what does that mean, what are your intentions, what are the needs that you hope to meet, etc., who are the students you'll be working with, and again, coming up with a specific project. So I have another note, but I'll talk about that in a minute when I talk about one of the projects I'm currently working on. Again, just in terms of the pathway, starting to think about what does it mean to be Indigenous focused, developing intercultural fluency, braiding different ways of knowing and being. So again, thinking about what are local protocol that you would need to think about, who are local guest speakers that you might call upon, or resources, and how are you going to create not just Indigenous content, but bringing in more of those, like community building into the classroom, relationships. I said that already. So By the time you get to community building, co-creating projects, this is when again, this would be PD time where you start to think about and reach out to find an international partner. We have Romana Pasca here at North Island College, who's just an amazing connection in terms of finding international partners to work with. So finding again who's your intercultural or global. Ours is the Office of Global Engagement. So reaching out during professional development time and whatnot. Um, Connecting with kinship is by this time you're probably working with students now and starting to think about how you're going to build relationship and how you might interweave that Indigenous perspective of kinship. And when I'm teaching, I always talk about community building and supporting and empowering one another, and that we create a community of learning in the classroom. We open it in a good way with stories of who I am, which I can share a little bit about after maybe. And we have an elder in residence present, often one of our elders who does drumming and storytelling. And then at the end of whatever the project is, we do a closing circle as well. So and then, just that reflection and reciprocity. So you've done all this work, you've worked with students. Now you reflect on the work that you've done, and what you've gained, and also what do how are you going to give back? So that idea of reciprocity and all of these journeys as gifts that we are given, and how are we going to then give back or pay it forward, depending on how you want to look at that. So, and just thinking about next steps in the COIL journey, my hope is that as more and more faculty members involve themselves or engage in these projects, that we will start to build resources together. We can share about our journeys, and what worked and what we learned. I have different ideas and suggestions and teachings that I've been taught that I can share in this process, but everybody else does too. And that is one of the neat aspects of COIL, is this evolution that, like Indigenous pedagogical approaches, there will be an evolution with reflection and new learning and new expertise and sharing, and creating kinship beyond our individual projects, our individual institutions, to create this larger community that's invested in indigenizing the digital landscape. Let me see. I wanted to share this lovely graphic rendering of the spring gathering we had. I want to say it was last year, but I actually think it was the year before because time is flying. So we had a gathering. It was with North Island College. We had international partners, people that have worked on projects came together. Our Indigenous Education Council members came, Indigenous advisors were there. We just had a whole group, a whole gathering. It was really fantastic. And we spent the day together talking about COIL and with the extra I, and what was it going to look like. And you'll notice in this graphic rendering that we have some of the language that's local to North Island College. Now, we serve a number of different regions, and actually that's the map behind me, is some of the regions that we share or that we serve. And so there's different languages that are being used, or different dialects that are being interwoven into what's happening at North Island College. We thought about indigenize as a verb, so moving forward or movement always, and that evolution, how indigenizing shifts depending on who's there, who the audience is, who the participants are. So always shifting, building trust. Again, I mentioned that I start my classes with an elder in residence and a sharing circle called Stories of Who I Am, where we really start to think about who we are and what we're going to contribute to our learning community. And we have drumming and song and story, depending on which elder comes to join us. So we start with ceremony and we end with ceremony. So, really, such an important protocol. What else would I notice here? Just empowering each other's, weaving together all cultures. It's an interesting, rewarding and sometimes challenging journey, as we even found during this gathering, because we were thinking about how do we interweave all the local pieces, keeping diversity really, really at the forefront, avoiding that pan-indigenizing kind of practice that can happen when we're trying to summarize and utilize the different tools. So it really is, it takes that work, that professional build or development, the investment, the willingness to build relationships and to be constantly learning about how COIL might shift, again, depending on who you're working with. So we really love this beautiful artwork, and is on our walls at the college now. Um, Actually, there was a meeting with some of the institutions in New Zealand. So Maori, I just had the opportunity to go to Maui actually and meet with Indigenous faculty there, which I'll share with you a bit more in a minute. So um, let me keep going. So Margaret was going to share a little bit about her story with her coil. She was unable to join us today, but so I'm just going to summarize really quickly from her notes. It was actually funded by 100K Strong. So it was a funded collaboration between the University of Colima in Mexico, Kapiolani Community College in Hawaii, and North Island College, us on Vancouver Island. They worked together. Margaret worked together with two other instructors in the fall of 2024, and some of the students and faculty were lucky and honored to be able to travel to Kapiolani Community College in Hawaii in February. So that is one of the neat outcomes of the virtual exchange, is that it can often turn into a physical exchange for some of the students afterwards, and what a rewarding experience that is. So they focused in Margaret's class on Indigenous perspectives on nurturing, environmental resilience, and sustainable practices. Again, Mexico, Hawaii, and Canada. It was asynchronous, and it looks like they had two face-to-face meetings. So I believe the students worked on their projects outside of class time, and then they had two face-to-face meetings. And she did give an example here, but I am not going to go into that because I don't have those extra little pieces. She has this little note, best laid plans. That really speaks to being patient and open to shifts that will occur, which I'll just go to the next slide and mention some of the shifts that we might not keep in mind that are really important. So my more recent project, I already mentioned the Costa Rica project, which was really neat. I ended up with all Indigenous students. Not all my classes are all Indigenous students. They're open to everyone. But in this, for whatever reason, in this particular time in Costa Rica, I ended up with all Indigenous students. So, and a non-Indigenous instructor from Costa Rica. But Um, I'll mention that again in a minute. Um, so what's coming up? So as I mentioned, I had the opportunity to travel to Maui and to go to the University of Hawaii, Maui College, and meet with Native American and faculty at the college and talk about what they're doing. They're really interweaving Indigenous pedagogical approaches into their courses. It's just wonderful. So one faculty member, an English faculty member, and I, an Indigenous English faculty member, and I really connected with the courses that we're working on, and we had just this fabulous meeting. It was supposed to be an hour long. It ended up being 2 hours. Partly because we were both a little bit chatty, as you might have noticed already. But we really became excited about the idea of working together. So that's our plan for the winter 2026. We're going to explore community building through storytelling and reflection, Indigenous style. That's our working title at this point. We are not, let me see, how do I say that? Our focus is more the coming together and less on, the English components of what we're doing. So I believe hers is a literature course and mine is a research and academic writing course. So I think that's part of some of the logistics, like some of the pieces that have to come together. And I'll mention that in a minute. But what I really wanted to bring up is that you don't have to have a full semester to have a COIIL. Um, this particular project, I think we're going to meet 3 times over the semester digitally. And so we're really going to focus on community building, relationship building, in this particular COIIL. We will start with stories of who I am, which is one of the projects that I always do with students. And then my colleague in Maui is going to um, do this relationship building. I believe it's using plants, indigenous plant metaphors. So she's got more information on that particular project. I'll know more because we're meeting next week. So I had hoped to meet with her before I came in today, but that didn't work out. So I will have more information on what we're doing next week. So we'll probably come together at the beginning of the semester, probably 2 or 3 weeks in. So give us both a chance to get grounded with our classes. We'll gather together for stories of who I am. Halfway through the semester, we'll gather again to talk about where we're at in our semesters, what we're doing, and also share the plant metaphor. And then we'll have a third meeting at the end of the semester where we'll come together and in some ceremonial way, we'll close our learning community that we've briefly connected. We haven't discussed exactly what kind of projects that we will give students. We will probably have them do a little bit of group work outside of our meetings, but we still are working on those pieces. We still haven't decided which digital platform. I have a feeling it'll be Zoom. North Island College uses Kaltura. I have found that doesn't work quite as well internationally, so I think we'll look at Zoom. These are little things that you have to keep track of. Again, logistics, thinking about how many meetings you want to have and times and time differences. So thinking back on my initial Costa Rica virtual exchange, the instructor and I did not, my other instructor and I did not think about the time differences, nor did we remember that we had a time change in BC that they didn't have in Costa Rica. And I was traveling to Costa Rica when the time change occurred. So when I was on the plane, there was this time change in BC, but not in Costa Rica. I was so messy the first few days of our virtual exchange because I had gotten time all off. I think I showed up early for class or late. Anyways, it was really, really challenging. And the other aspect we didn't think about with the Costa Rica virtual exchange is language differences. So we spent a lot of time in translation, and that was something that just did not occur to me, having never done anything like that before. So we realized then that trying to have a full semester together was too much, that the projects we needed to maybe, I don't want to say simplify, but make them more accessible for stuff like language differences, time changes, also student participation. That's something I'm still thinking about for this upcoming COIL because our classes don't overlap. They miss each other by about an hour. And so I'm trying to think about how to bring students from North Island College in. And it might be that I offer extra percentage for students that want to participate in the COIL. That's something I still am working out with the department and just all those little bits and pieces. And then again, what kind of activities do we want to do? It does feel a little less complex because they'll be speaking English from Maui College, and we speak English, so we don't have to worry about translation and language confusion that really hit me the first time I did that. That was really, we did find our feet in the Costa Rica virtual exchange, and it was absolutely beautiful. The students were so impacted and shared about it changing their lives, and not realizing that other Indigenous students across the world were concerned about land back topics, looking at how colonization was different for students in Costa Rica in relation to students in what is now Canada. So just all those bits and pieces that you need to think about as you're building a COIL. I think that was so. I think that is where we're at this point. I will just mention again, because the project is no longer funded, it is something that we're working off, kind of the side of our desk, I suppose. Um, I was going to, was thinking about sharing just what our website looks like right now, but I don't know if I can bring it up with this screen share. So maybe I'll just leave that for now. I've managed to talk for already 45 minutes. Wow, I am a chatterbox. I think it's, I'm happy to sort of stop there and start thinking about what ideas might have come up for you as you've been listening. Are there any challenges or opportunities that you see in furthering the COIL or COIL with the extra I initiatives? Is that something you might be interested in? And I really think that is probably where I will leave it right now. Yeah. So I'm not sure if I should check the chat box here. And this might be where I call on
Yes.
Morgan.
Hi,
Hi.
Laura. Thank you. We'll just stop the recording here as we move into the question period.
Yes. Okay.